The Mayo Experience.
That Mayo Experience. That Mayo Experience. That Mayo Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by Underdog. This is the Genesis Invitational Final Bets, DraftKings picks, lineups, weather, one and done, everything you need to know before the tournament starts to get yourself ready. Tambo is on the line joining me from shipitnation.com. Tiger is no longer in the field. How do you feel about that? I know you were 100% Tiger this week.
Yeah, 60. He came out at $6,300. I was more just curious to see what his price would be. Obviously, anytime Tiger can be in the field, it's great, but unfortunately couldn't make this one. So now we get Jake Knapp, who is the stone minimum price, which we'll get to later. But yeah, it sucks that he can't make it out here yet, but we'll still be able to see him in those TGL streets, Pat.
How do you feel about the slate dynamics right now? Because we have a 72-player field. There is a cut this week. It's top 50 in ties, plus anyone who is within 10 strokes of the lead. Obviously, they're not playing it at Riviera. They're playing it at Torrey Pines based off the Palisades wildfires. So we saw this tournament kind of 2 weeks ago, although it does seem like they have not cut the rough sense, which is really nice. It's the first time, I think this is the earliest time ever in the year, Tambo, where we have seen the social media clips of the guys dropping the ball in the rough and the ball disappearing.
This early, you mean? Yeah, exactly. So everyone loves that. It literally gets posted like 14 times in every Discord because people don't look up to see what others posted. But yeah, saw that a bunch. Ben Griffin there. And I think from slate dynamic perspective, like you talked about, the one most interesting part is they did not really adjust Scottie Scheffler. He was 12K last week, bigger field, mind you, and et cetera, but he got to 60%. I definitely don't see that this week. We'll talk about it when we get there, but it does sort of lean into that. And I think a lot of people are just looking at the course playing completely different and going full on Bombers narrative with the rain coming in. We'll get to weather, playing longer, all of that and more, Pat. So I think that's going to be the conversation when we get through it.
I think it is. And I think that actually does create some decent value on like the Russell Henleys of the world, those short hitters. They're not me out there hitting at 230 yards off the tee. Like they're big hitters, but they're wildly accurate. Like maybe that there is room that if everyone is taking the mega bombers, maybe the Morikawa, Tom Kim type hyper accurate player who can putt on POA and has decent scrambling. There probably is value in those guys this week. It's just finding which ones actually come through, I think, is the difficult part.
For sure. Yeah. But I think like what you said is perfect. And even if you do want to go a heavier bomber narrative, shout out to our guy Raza. We always talk about the skill stat builds that he does. You could go that way, but like it wouldn't hurt to plug in a one-off of somebody else or something. Like there is going to be guys that put it out long enough, have really good long irons, hit some greens, make the pars that are required on those long par fours, and then pick up some scoring on the par fives and just grind their way around and get their way through and have a chance on Sunday. It'll definitely happen, at least with a couple guys. It usually does.
Yeah, I would almost definitely just double down on tee to green this week if that was the way I was going to approach my shorter hitters. So right now, the top guys past 36 rounds tee to green in the field who are not like plus driving distance players. Hideki and Collin are the elite versions. Glover is up there. Michael Kim is actually inside the top 10 of tee to green overall over the past 36 rounds. JJ Spawn would be one of them. Berger would be another. Davis Thompson's long enough, I suppose. Tom Kim, Andrew Novak is up there. Seamus Power is another one. JT Poston and Shane Lowry. Those are all the ones that go inside the top 25 of your medium to a bit shorter off the tee distance wise, but still cobbled together around the green and approach enough. And I think this is going to be like, what do you think the winning score is going to be this week? I'm going to guess like -9.
I was going with 10 under or something. Like that's kind of how I saw it. So we're on the same page.
So if it's that, then yeah, you're going to get bailed out because of distance. You're going to be able to hit up the par fives a lot easier, of course, although the one on the back, no one's really getting there in two. Although if the wind is with you on number two, maybe you can get it down to like 30 yards or something like that. Like Rory will probably take a go. Bryson, I believe, drove it in the US Open when it was here in 2021. So that hole can be quite gettable, although there's big numbers to be made if you have a really terrible drive to go along with it. But just going back to last week, you had mentioned something just before we came on live about Scottie passing 60% in ownership and what that did to the rest of the ownership of the field.
Yeah, just in general, like part of that was, I think you and I were, as the week went on, we were going higher and higher with the number. I had some bets out there with people. And I was thinking like, okay, now we're getting to 50 range. Did not expect to see 60. It's definitely the highest ever. Sky put it out there, highest ever in the flagship tournament for ownership. It surpassed like John Rahm at the Mexico Open, Cantlay at one of the big ones one year, one of the easier courses one year. But just to note, that's what got forgotten. Is everybody just kept saying they know that's going up, but I don't think they were adjusting for it everywhere else, meaning Billy Horschel was the only other guy over 20. I think he was 21%. And then every single golfer was 16, maybe one guy at 16. Every single other golfer was 15% or less. There was 85% or more of the field not playing those other golfers. So there was a ton of different ways to get different and find leverage even within your Scottie Scheffler lineups.
I didn't have a great week because I didn't have Dietrich in any of my lineups, so that was a struggle. But I had a ton of Spieth, which really did help out. And Michael Kim ended up coming through, who I just bet and randomly play every week because he's my guy. There's only one pro golfer who's been on this show, and it's Michael Kim. So we have to support Michael Kim for everything that he does. And if he can support us and winning our lineups, that's pretty nice as well. But you kind of hit on it. We went through the original chalk build of all of those 7K guys that we knew that everyone was going to pair with Scottie Scheffler, or at least some combo of them. And you were just like, yeah, just straight fade them. I did straight fade them, and it worked out.
It can put you in a spot. Like, I still got a bunch of opportunities to get my money back and had a better result than if I had went that way. The one guy I went back on that I was was unfortunate, but was Billy Ho. That's why I said in the post, I should have listened to my own advice a little bit more, but that's what I said when I did it. Like, the setup of that is there's always going to be major FOMO. Like, when you fade all those dudes in that range that are popular, you're like, well, the reason they're popular is for good reason. You have that fear of missing out. But the opportunity was, we talked about it, there was 50 guys in that range. You're actually only getting rid of 10%. There's still a huge likelihood the other guys are going to come through, and you would have landed on pivots like Dietrich and like some of the other guys that found their way to the top of the board. So that's just a strategy you can incorporate anytime there's going to be extreme ownership in a field that size, all the other factors that go with it. And I thought it was a really good one last week. Some weeks you'll find that's in the 9K range, right? Everyone just can't get to the top because they don't feel. It's not going to be the case this week. We got Scottie and Rory here, but keep that in mind as other tournaments go on throughout the season.
Reminder to everyone, go to Underdog, use code Mayo right now, get your deposit bonus of up to $1,000. We got some cool golf tournaments coming up, I think right around the Players' Championship. So get yourself acclimated. There's NFL best ball, and I will have a pick'em entry ready and locked, loaded, ready to go for Thursday at the Genesis. I'll have that in the free newsletter coming out this evening. Mayo Media on Substack. You can just hit the description and find all of the stuff. I'll have it sent with all of my final plays because I still have some stuff to talk through with you, including the weather. Smash the like while you're here too. Good live audience. We'll get to your questions at the very end of the show, so you might want to hold them for that or put them in now, and maybe I'll remember to go back and scroll back. I probably won't remember to go and scroll back. So, save your questions, but sub to the channel. That's the only way that you can actually leave a question is by subbing to Mayo Media on YouTube. So please do that. Smash like, all that fun stuff. Sub to the newsletter. Code Mayo at Underdog. The weather is looking a little bit better from what it showed earlier on in the week, although it's still pretty windy on Thursday for almost the majority of the field. Like, it remains pretty consistent, 15 to 17 all day long once the guys actually get out there, starting around 9 a.m. And then the gusts are up to 20 to 25. There might be rain sprinkled out throughout the day as well. I think it's going to play pretty difficult on Thursday.
Definitely feels that way. There's rain coming in overnight as well. Still, that's certainly still showing versus what, the start of the week, you saw that, but then you saw like a windier range on Thursday. I think one of the more interesting things, Pat, is now that it's sort of leveled out, and obviously keep an eye on the weather. We have time still, but in general, the temps are the same throughout the day. Like, usually you're like, oh, I don't want them going out in the morning because it's going to be nasty. It's going to be just as nasty, just as windy, just as wet, but it's going to be a lot colder. It doesn't actually look like it gets warmer as the day goes on. It looks like it's going to be pretty cold throughout the day for where they're playing. And then the wind has sort of settled out as of now, where it's kind of even across the board in both actual and gusts, at least for Thursday. Kind of similar, though, for Friday as well. Sprinkled rain throughout.
Yeah, Friday looks like the rain's going to come overnight and soften up the course a little bit. I don't know if it's enough to put lift, clean, and replace into play. But the one thing we have to remember about this tournament, there's only 72 players. There is going to be a cut. Do you find that in these smaller field tournaments that there's any advantage to a wave stack? Because, if you take guys at the very beginning, they won't be on the course the same guys that tee off at the very end. But the majority of people are going to be on the course at the same time.
Yeah, I think it's like a 2-hour split I saw between the first group that goes off and the last or whatever. So, in a field like this, it's twofold. One, it's a smaller field. Threefold, really. Two, the times are close together, like you just said. And then three, the strength of field is really there. So I think a lot of these guys that, he's, technically kind of in the bad wave, if that even became a thing, it's like realistically they can grind through it. There's better players in this field than a typical your average PGA Tour field, like something like last week. So I'm not really looking into it too much, at least as of right now, unless we get some sort of drastic change. The only advantage that you can find, and you and I have talked about this plenty in the past, would be if you thought sort of you're automatically avoiding some of the natural chalk. I know some people think it's always about just the weather. Sometimes if you do go with the wave, again, not too much of a split here in time, but sometimes if you do go with the wave, you can just naturally avoid some of that chalk and see that some of your player pools in that similar wave either way and just roll it from there.
One thing I would be somewhat concerned about, and this is the weather. This could go either way or become nothing at all, but very late on Thursday, after the guys are off the course, we're seeing winds up to 25 consistent, gusts up to 40, and that's from like 7 p.m. through midnight. If that just moves up a few hours, guys could get annihilated Thursday or into Friday morning, and they get annihilated Friday morning.
Yeah, that would lead to some, like if you were wanting to start the guys that are first off on Thursday, kind of goes with maybe it's a little bit softer from overnight rain and the little bit of sprinkle they're getting in the morning. And then also if the temps are going to stay similar throughout the day, the chance that the wind picks up into the sort of the 2 hour later window that we talked about, then maybe, but I'll have to look into it further to see. I don't know if I see as much of that right now, but it definitely would be a possibility for sure.
So what you need to do is basically get out there and play Seamus Power, Nick Dunlop, Tom Hoagie, Bezadenhout, Ben Griffin, and Patrick Rogers. Make that your lineup. They're all first 6 guys on the course.
Yeah, Ben Griffin knows all about the rough. So he's out first thing in the morning. He's going to try and avoid that stuff. If he can do it, $6,200. He's first off on Thursday with the group of, I don't know exactly who's in it, but there's a couple groups off early. You mentioned some of those names.
Yeah, so that's what we're doing with the weather. The bets, I really haven't done anything differently from what I posted on Monday and the show. I've been waiting to talk this through with you, and I was waiting for odds to adjust a little bit, and it did happen. So now I have a real conundrum on my hands, Tambo. I have bet... Let's see here. I bet Adam Scott at 90 or 85 to 1. Sorry. I bet Will Zalatoris at 55 to 1 and Wyndham Clark at 100 to 1. Those are the 3 bets that I have in right now. And I didn't want to add anything to the card because I actually think Scottie's going to win this week. I like the idea that no one really thinks he's going to win because he had a bad back 9 on Sunday when his only route to trying to win was to fire at every pin, which he was doing through 9 holes. And then like when it went away, it went away. Like whatever, it happens with Scottie. But this is he doesn't have like the long-term history you would like to see at Torrey Pines. He generally doesn't play the Farmers. So really what you're looking at is just the US Open, which is a tougher setup. And he was fine. I believe he was 7th at the US Open that year. That I just think that when you see a winning score is going to be -8, -9, -10, if that's the route you're going with, you look at Scottie. And that's what I was thinking. I just really didn't want to bet him at +350. I open up the odds board today, Tambo. He's at 5 to 1 all of a sudden. And I still have a 30% boost to get him up to 7.5 to 1 if I really want to, which I would do on that. So I guess the conundrum becomes, do I take Scottie and just put him with those other 3 guys, which is fine. That's why I left the card as open as I did, to make sure that I had bullets in the chamber for a Scottie bet if I wanted it, if the odds got to the point where I wanted. And I think that they are right now at +750. Or for less money, I could bet Pendrith, Hideki, and Jason Day for less money if I wanted to.
I mean, yeah, it all comes down to what you think about Scottie. I don't like betting any golfers at like 3 or 5 to 1. I just don't care enough. And usually most people aren't going to get enough money down to make it matter, or your boost isn't going to give you enough or whatever it might be. But if you really think he's going to do it, I like it. I think you can use that to your advantage a lot of different ways. You can bet it. You can play him in DFS. You can play him in one and done. There's so many ways that you can get Scottie money that way. It's just, if you want those other 3 guys and you think they have a legit shot, then yeah, you'd get 3 more golfers out there and then maybe use Scottie as a spot, like I mentioned, in one and done or in DFS heavy or something like that instead.
The funny thing is, I actually think Scottie has more win equity than those 3 guys combined.
He does. The numbers will show it. I mean, you can go look it up. You're not going to, we talk about this a ton in DFS, and I know you're talking betting, but you're not going to make up the win equity for Scottie very easily. It's almost, besides the Rory stuff this week, which we'll get to later, but that's different. You're comparing Scottie to 3 non-Rory golfers. And I don't see it. So it would be Scottie.
And even using the Fantasy National simulator results that are out right now, fantasynational.com/Mayo, get yourself to 20% off. We got players and major season and Mexico Open season coming up. So you're really going to want to get in there. But Scottie's at 9.5% win rate in this tournament. So his odds are bad relative to what his win percentage is. His true odds should be like 10.5 to 1, but they're going to rake us all over the place in the betting market anyway. No one's going to really be good odds. And Rory's at 6.6%. The next closest guy would be Thomas, who's just behind Rory. And then you're into like Pendrith at 3.7%.
Yeah, I've similar, sort of a similar board to look at, but I would say that the numbers are even boosted higher. So it's like, yeah, I don't see the guys who did you mention again? You said Pendrith.
Well, it goes Scottie, Rory, Thomas are the top
who
three.
You said you were betting. You said you would bet instead of Scottie.
I was just kind of using an example, but the guys that I like Hideki this week. I like Pendrith this week, but I missed out on the good Pendrith number, so I'm probably not going to get there. And then like Jason Day, someone like that.
Yeah, they might have like a 7 or 8% win equity combined.
All right, then I'm doing it. Scottie Scheffler, 7.5 to 1. Let's go. Okay.
I like it.
The funny one that jumped out in the betting card was actually Grazerman, who was like 4th in win equity. And he's 100 to 1 right now. I mean, I guess I would technically have room for that if I wanted to bet another 100 to 1 guy. You take the 7.5 because basically I'm getting double what the odds were at the Open, that I could throw another 100 to 1 guy on there. The other one I really like this week is Jaeger, that I got to figure out how to like use him, whether it's like a top 5, top 10, first round leader, something like that. Because I loved Jaeger 2 weeks ago, as did everyone, to win this tournament at 66 to 1, and he sucked. And he really got jammed down on that terrible day on the North Course. But everything we liked about Jaeger 2 weeks ago, he's still Steven Jaeger, and now he's like 180 to 1 or something.
Disrespectful. The guy that took down Scottie last year, too, don't forget, literally put it on him. So I would say for sure he put the fear in Scottie. You got to go to him this week.
Yeah, so I'll add Scottie. So it'll be Scottie, Zalatoris, Scott, and Clark will be the 4 bets, and then I'll have anything updated in the newsletter a little bit later on. I do want to play some first-round leaders, so Jaeger and probably Jake Knapp will end up on the first-round leader list. I was actually even thinking about Wyndham Clark as well. He was first-round leader last week. He's been starting out hot in tournaments, even at the Century and at Amex, and then he just kind of fizzles away as the week goes along, so you're hoping he can keep that together. But these are the setups that I like for him, where he can kind of spray it around off the tee. That's not that big of a deal. His approach play was a little bit better last week. And he's one of the few players in the field, even Scottie doesn't even really come into this. Rory is really the guy that you think about as it pertains to a great short game and can match it with that sort of putting. Wyndham Clark's one of the few that can actually do that.
Yeah, he's got the upside always. It's just what version do we get this week? It's often talked about his past more than his present, right? That you're bringing it up for that reason. But I think this week is full of those conversations. I know he just had a 16th last week, so he's a bit different than these other guys. But this is a week, Pat, where you and I build like the lineups where, why are they priced this low? Like we know why, but it's like it seems insane. Like Max Homa, Victor Hovland, Will Zalatoris, like some of these guys are priced at extremely low numbers when we get to DraftKings later on, that you could kind of just play them for that. And it does lead out into the betting market as well. But Wyndham Clark fits the mold for sure.
Let's move to one and done fantasygolfchampionships.com. We are 6 weeks in? I'm not doing great. I'll tell you that much. I am in the money for one of them. So I'm currently winning $500, which means I'm currently losing $250 across my 3 entries. But Spieth really boosted me up in one of my terrible teams. And then I have one that's still in the money right now, which I believe I've already used. I used Scottie on at Pebble Beach in that lineup. So that's not looking good. That's the main team that we talk about on this show. So I've used Scottie. I've used Ludwig. And Ludwig I thought was a pretty interesting one and done name this time around, because now everyone is like really bracing for something terrible to go wrong with him. But he's had the shits 2 of the past 2 tournaments and had to withdraw. Happens. As someone who lives in a very frigid temperature, Tambo, with little kids, I get getting sick randomly out of nowhere.
Imagine if I lived in the same area.
I know it would happen. And
it's almost like I would know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, exactly.
So what do we do here? You mentioned to me before, Justin Thomas has already been used by 33% of the field.
Which makes it interesting, I guess. But does that just mean more people pile on because now they're thinking this way? I guess this is my takes, and I really wanted to talk to you about this week because I'm kind of been struggling and just going through it. But feels like, nobody really wants Scottie because of that back 9. You already mentioned it earlier. I do think that translates a little bit over to here. I think the Rory situation is pretty obvious. People think that he's the one. And the question is, do you just roll with Rory while he's playing good on a course that would seemingly fit exactly everything you want with a guy like Rory and he's playing good? Or do you take the shot with I don't know. To me, it's like three other guys, probably JT, Morikawa, and maybe Ludwig at low to no ownership. Hideki, if you got him, like I guess there's a few up there, but it's really you go. It's to me, it's Rory or go with the other guys and take a shot.
I'm not going to go with Rory. I do think that Rory will end up being the most popular pick. So if he ends up winning a $5 million prize and I don't have him, it's going to suck, as it did the last time around for the $5 million prize that he won. But he's played this tournament, 3 times? Like a 5th, a 3rd, a 16th. Like if he wasn't able to win it at Torrey Pines and the US Open in easier conditions against like a weaker field, and then if the US Open wasn't inside the top 10, then maybe this isn't the greatest course for him. Maybe there's, unless it's Rory, he can most definitely win, especially coming in really playing really good form right now. But I think I would rather take a Hideki. Do you think Pendrith is going to be pretty highly owned in one and done?
I don't think so, no. I think people like him, but they'll be betting him or playing him in DFS, stuff like that. I don't see him being super popular here. It's tough to say, but I don't see it.
So Rory, Colin, Morikawa then are probably your top 3?
Rory, Colin, and Thomas. That's what I got. Rory, Thomas, Morikawa is who I see coming into sort of the top 3.
All right, so that leaves like Hideki. Sungjae plays this course really well. If you want to get someone who like will probably be lurking by the time we get to the very end, Sungjae will probably be there.
Yeah, I could see that for sure as well. I love my guy Sungjae. It hasn't been, there's ups and downs with him, and that's kind of the difference. We're always looking at his numbers and thinking about him. It's been wild, like in his past X amount of results of like a 3rd and a 4th are mixed in, but also a missed cut, a 33rd, a 57th. Like he's up or down, man, but this would be the spot. I think it'd be another guy that you could definitely take a chance on.
Oh, for sure. And I'm just looking back to the 2021 US Open. Okay, T50, so that's not very good. But the other one that was kind of sticking out to me, because we talked about this with Pebble, and that lineup ended up crushing. What are we seeing that's kind of similar to Pebble Beach? Obviously, it's not the same course, but one of the reasons we went with that like all Euro grinder lineups, like it's going to be cold, it's going to be wet, there's going to be wind, and we picked like all of the Euro guys. What about Fleetwood or Lowry in the one and done?
Yeah, Fleetwood wins often. You should definitely pick him for one. No, I'm just kidding. But I just, man, this is what I wanted to ask you about, because I think those guys are fine. I think Lowry, Fleetwood, if you're not going to go with the sentiment of what we talked about, of like a Rory, a JT, a Morikawa, you don't see it being Scheffler. You can save these guys. There's obviously tons of tournaments that you can use these best players in the world at versus what suits a golfer that you're probably going to use at some point this year, like Fleetwood or Lowry or those guys. So that makes sense. I guess my struggle, Pat, and just going back to it, is like the Rory situation. So when do you feel good about just going with the field? You know what I mean? Like last week, a lot of people in DFS felt fine just going with Scottie and going with the field. In one and done, how does that translate for you? Because we know Rory's going to be popular, but like you said, it's a huge prize. He's playing well. You literally just comped, even though it's not the same, and you agreed to that, but like the Pebble Beach angle is kind of the angle here, and it's Rory playing good. When do you just go with the field and find the other spots to pick up the difference in lower owned options in one and done?
I just don't think you ever have to go with the field in one and done. Like if you have listen, if you had so much conviction that Rory is going to win that like, oh, if 20% of the field is using Rory this week in one and done, I have to use him too. Just go bet Rory at 8-1 or something like that. If you're that convinced that he's going to win and really cash in on it that way. But the difference between something like riding it out in DFS is you have 5 other guys to make a lineup, and you feel convinced about this, that it's not only that, with Scheffler last week, let's say. So does Scheffler have to win in order to make his 60% price tag valuable? Not necessarily. Let's say he comes in 3rd, and that's not what happened, obviously. It wasn't a good play. But let's say he comes in 3rd, and he is the only guy of the top 5 that ended up coming inside the top 15 or something like that. Well, with the way that lineups get built, you probably still would have needed him to be in. He wouldn't have been in the optimal lineup, but with the way that people actually build lineups, because it's not like people just leave 8,000 on the table all the time. Right. So Scottie's probably going to be in there either way. With one and done, it's not necessarily the same, because you can only use that guy once all year. So if you're basically betting the don't pass line in craps, it's like, yeah, Rory's going to come in 7th, and that's just not going to be good enough. I'm going to find a spot where Rory, when people are off of him a little bit more, because now he's been, it's almost like the JT thing, where he's been 33% used already. By the time we get to the Masters or wherever it is, especially if Rory continues to play like well but doesn't win, he's going to be like 70% owned before we get to major season. And you're like, okay. Now, obviously, Rory doesn't win majors, so maybe that's not a great example. But we do have Quail Hollow on the docket. We do have some good Rory courses with elevated prize pools. that, I don't know, I just think there's better spots to use them than taking the most popular guy. And I find predicting, like, I'm not the best at projecting DraftKings ownership. Like, relatively, I'm okay at it. To get numbers down in one and done, I find incredibly difficult, because the only reason that I use Ludwig at Pebble is because I thought that people weren't going to use him. And then we came on and talked about how I'm going to use Ludwig, and then all of a sudden he's like 9% owned, the fourth highest owned guy. It's like, well, had I have known that, I wouldn't have used him.
That's why I say it's tricky, and I get the one-time usage, but that's kind of the other setup. And I'm only saying this because I learned it the hard way with Scottie Scheffler last year. Like, you literally could have picked him 7 or 8 times and found a big win, feels like, or at least 5 of those were huge wins. So it's like, to me, with Rory, what are we doing? Because that's how I look at it. Like, if he goes on to win this week, I'm going to be pissed that I didn't have him for this. And then when to pick him up, the next time, how is he really going to win again, or a third one? Like, then it's really tricky to pick the spot. It's almost like I just feel better about it. So I'm really struggling this week, but it's either going to be Rory, JT, or Ludwig for me. That's the 3 that I'm considering.
And for the team that, like, we're talking about on this show, and I keep my other 2 picks private, not that you would ever want to follow those picks anyway. I was thinking about Zalatoris.
Yeah, we've already burned Scottie, so it's tough. But I would rather Fleetwood or Lowry than taking a shot on Zal. Even though I really like Zal this week and think he's a good option, but it's more of like a DFS thing for me when we get there at $7,900. Take a shot. I don't know if he's going to come out and get the job done and find his way to the top 5 or top 3 or a win to get us the job done in one and done, and rather see a little bit more out of him as he continues to get healthy throughout the season. I think there's a ton of tournaments that still fit his mold that he can come through at. Yeah,
Lowry's a bit interesting. Like, he has some decent results at Torrey Pines, but nothing great. But I always like him as like a longer course US Open style player, despite being one of those guys that's not super long off the tee. He just happens to be incredibly accurate and some good results.
Another par master. He just makes pars when he needs to, man. It's like, that's how he comes through, and then he gets the scoring done. And if he ever gets the putter rolling, when he does, it's often really good. But it's also like, that's my thing. If we don't have Scottie, we don't want to use Rory. Do we just say pick one of JT, Morikawa, or Ludwig or something? Or do we drop down and risk it on a Lowry? That's where I would feel better about just risking it on a Lowry. I'm good.
Hideki would be the other one.
I like that too, because we still have him. I don't. I already burned him.
All right, I'm going to use Hideki for our team in this.
I like it.
I like the way that he's been hitting his irons. Like, the driving hasn't been great, the putting hasn't been great, but as long as those irons continue to go, I know he's going to hit more fairways in the field this week, by and large. Unless he puts some white out again on his 3-wood and gets disqualified from a tournament. Hopefully he's learned his lesson from that. I do worry that he's been playing a ton of golf at the moment, but that could also kind of reel it back into, dude is healthy and he's feeling it right now. It's just, if he's continuing to run out there and playing all these tournaments, I don't worry about fatigue from him in that sense. I just need him to be a little bit better around the greens and on the greens. And generally speaking, he is good around the greens. One of like the all-world players from greenside. Is need him to make some putts. And he basically plays this tournament every year at this course, which I do think is an advantage.
And 2 quick things on him. One, I said this yesterday on our show, but like I think people missed that he took the Amex off. Everyone keeps saying like 6 in a row, 7 in a row. No, he took a tournament. He won. He finished 16th, and then he took the Amex off. So he's only really played 3 in a row right now. He had a whole week off. So I mean, he's good from that perspective, I think. And then also just the type of course setup. It's kind of like what you said, Pat. It reminds me of NFL. Let's play these older guys earlier in the season and get them while they're healthy. And we know at some point with Hideki, it's, neck my back, Hideki Matsuyama. Like, this guy's going to have something wrong with him sooner than later, hopefully just not this week. So let's get it out of the way now, where he actually fits the course, can play well here, and I think he's fine. Let's roll him out.
Before we get to the DraftKings lineups and ownership and everything DraftKings related this week, there is a question in the chat from Peter, who says, Ludwig shot +7 on Sunday at the Farmers, ... Scar tissue? Dude was sick, man. He was throwing up off the fairway. Listen, we give people passes for a lot of things. I'm going to give him a pass for being sick and trying to play through it. The other guy's just WD'd.
Yeah, it's 2 things. One, we legit saw he was actually sick. He's not making it up. Remember that week where everyone's like, oh, Max Homa said he was sick too. They're like, well, we didn't see it, and he just played like shit. So who knows if that's actually true. Ludwig, we knew was sick. And 2, it's what you said. He could have just WD'd. He could have just moved it along. He gutted it out. Did it. He said there was like Underdog Golf postings saying, like, Ludwig, the quotes of him saying he wasn't sure if he was going to continue. We knew he was sick that time. And the next week out, he tried it, still couldn't get through it, and had to WD. I think illnesses, JJ Spawn is going to be an example we get to later. Illness, usually you can heal up from an illness in a few days. And in this case, he didn't. but now he should be good. It's another week later. So again, it's a risky option, but if you're giving him a pass, I got no problem with that. I think it's fine.
Yes, you can always make an excuse or hold it against someone depending on how much you actually want to play that guy. So if you want to use Ludwig, I do think his ownership will be depreciated, at least this time around, if you want to go do it. And I do think that he's going to be healthy. But if he's not and he sucks, I mean, he could be healthy and suck. There's also that option too.
Yeah, that's always going to be an option. But like you said, it's going to be baked into everything we're talking about. When we just talked about one and done, great option. If you want somebody who's off the board and you think somehow this is his time, it is a course I think that suits him just fine. If he had been healthy coming in, think about how popular he would be versus the WD, the puking, all of that stuff. So that just tells you everything you need to know. And then when we get to DraftKings shortly, it's going to be the ownership conversation because nobody's playing him compared to the guys around him, at least.
For sure. And so on DraftKings and one and done, he's probably a better bet because you're getting a little bit of a discount on Ludwig in the betting market, but not a ton. Like the best number I'm seeing right now is at 27-1, and he has fallen throughout the week because no one is betting him. But I don't know, he dropped from 18 to 27. It's a significant drop in the market, but that's probably where he should be. Like a healthy Ludwig in this field anyway. Like he gets overpriced because he's the next big thing. He's going to be a superstar. People want to believe that Ludwig is already a top 3 player in the world, and he's still 6th in odds. But like, does he have significantly more win equity than, I mean, I was going to say Tommy Fleetwood, but Shane Lowry or Day or Sam Burns or any of those guys? Probably not at the moment.
There's something to this Fleetwood thing. We'll get there. But you mentioned him a couple of times now. You're getting excited for old Tommy boy. But I agree with you on what you just said. And I think, like, imagine you mentioned the big prize this week in something like one and done. What percentage is Ludwig going to be there? Which is, I know it's still super early in the season, but there is nothing like getting a huge win early on in one and done, if that's how you want to pay it off, versus the 25-1 or whatever number you're finding out there. So I'm fine with it if you want to go with it that way, but I agree with you, everything you just said, as far as what he compares to on the win equity side right now, especially circumstances at hand.
All right, we will discuss some DraftKings lineups, the ownership, and take your questions right after this. When you're going on a golf trip, you don't need any more stress. You don't need any more costly airline fees. With complimentary insurance, real-time tracking, and dedicated support and on-time delivery, you need to use ShipSticks.com. Just schedule your shipment, attach your label, and ShipSticks handles the rest, delivering your gear directly to your destination. You don't want to have to worry about a connection, whether your clubs are going to make it and you're racing to the course. No, your clubs are going to be there. ShipSticks offers white glove shipping for golf clubs and luggage. Travel worldwide without luggage. ShipSticks delivers to 180 countries for a hassle-free, gear-free journey. Right now, ShipSticks is offering my listeners 20% off your first shipment when you go to ShipSticks.com and use the code PatMayo. Go to ShipSticks.com and use the code PatMayo to get 20% off your first shipment and save yourself the hassle this golf season. That's ShipSticks.com. Make sure to use the code PatMayo so they know that I sent you. Welcome to the TGL presented by SoFi, golf's newest league. It's sharp and it's electric. 2 hours of hammer dropping, overtime forcing, playoffs on the line golf with 24 of the best players from the PGA Tour. Monday, February 17th, triple header time. Atlanta versus LA, Atlanta versus the Bay, and the Bay versus Boston. Then Tuesday, it's Tiger and Jupiter against the New York Golf Club. Tune in to TGL matches only on ESPN, ESPN2, and ESPN Plus. Keep up. It's golf. Welcome back to the Pat Mayo Experience, talking Genesis Invitational, DraftKings picks, lineups, ownership. Reminder to you good people, you smash the like, you sub to the channel. If you're sub to Mayo Media Network right now on YouTube, you can enter the chat. And our good man Jared behind the camera has figured out how to put the questions on the screen. So you can see your name on the screen. Make sure it's not an offensive name. In fact, I don't care. Make it as offensive as you'd like. Tambo, who is going to be the most owned player? Because I think it's Rory, and Rory over Scottie.
And I think everybody thinks that, and I still think it's going to be close, but I still think Scottie comes in higher owned.
All right. I'm building my lineups using Fantasy National, fantasynational.com/Mayo to get you 20% off. You get the leaderboard app, you get all the stats, you get all the tools. What I do on my research show on Sunday, you can find it's all up on the screen for you as well. Let's build a lineup then and get into this. Where do you think the peoples will be going with their DraftKings lineups?
I think here's another call. We'll bring this one back. Maybe we can clip it out later. Sky will hook us up, and maybe some people play it, so it turns into that. I can predict the most duplicated lineup of the season so far, including swing season.
Rory
I got
Knapp.
it right here. Nope, not even close.
Okay.
Scottie Scheffler, and that's why maybe it's a bold take because everyone has this Rory thing in their head. But wait for this lineup. It's Scottie with Rasmus at 8,300. Then you play the two guys that everyone loves this week at 7,800, McNeely and Minwoo.
Okay.
And then you get your boy Siwoo Kim in there. And you land on Gare Bear, little Gary Woodland with $100 left over. The most duplicated lineup of the entire season so far incoming.
Is this what like optimizers are spitting out? Because I haven't seen anyone like basically any of these guys all week.
It's maybe it's a inside info, Pat, but this is the one. Trust me, this is the DFS most duplicated lineup of the season is my prediction.
Okay, well, we'll all enter that. Might as well split the winnings with everyone else who's playing it right now. And
hundreds, yeah.
So let's start with Scheffler, and we'll build a Scheffler out how I would want to do this. At the very bottom, I really do like Jake Knapp at 6,000. He was third here 2 years ago. I like him and Jaeger. So we throw in him and Jaeger at 64. Now we're back up to 84 with Scheffler. Like these are the sorts of builds that I think that I'm going to be using the majority of this week.
If you can get comfortable with this, I know it's a cut, and this has went really bad a couple of times, so I'll just say it as it is. But there's been weeks where people talk about this cut event, and in like these the player hosted events, there's 3 of them where there is a small cut, and like even the 10 within the lead, et cetera, and they're like, oh, it's basically a no cut. There has been 1 or 2 where that's went really bad, and it actually was a very strong cut event, and it was like, no, it didn't work.
This tournament last year was that everyone was on Justin Thomas, and he missed the cut.
Right. So it's like everyone's thinking, like, I can do whatever I want because it's a no cut essentially. And then it actually was definitely a real cut, and a bunch of the chalk got crushed and all of that. So it really hurt the 6 of 6s and stuff. But if you can get to this week, Pat, and you get these couple of 6K guys in, whether you go Scottie or if you go Rory, you get even more money, but you get to bypass the 7K range. And the reason that's different this week than last week is because last week we had around 50 golfers in there, and you could just play Scottie with 5 low-owned guys. And by the way, you talked about the Scottie play. Scottie ended up on a ton of massive winning lineups, right? 100K scores, 200K scores in the big 888. It's how people build their lineups, and only really JT had that finish that kind of went off and helped in other places. So you still could get away with it. This week, if you go in your double 6K lineup here to Scottie or Rory, you can avoid that 7K range where there's just 20 golfers and a ton of condensed chalk across the board. Even if it does get spread out a little bit, it's a lot of double-digit ownership throughout that range.
So I figured out the rest of this lineup, I think, because there's certain guys that I do want to target this week. And we'll get to I think Rory Pendrith is going to be a very popular stack as well. Just I think people are going to actively go out of their way to play Pendrith. And I don't really begrudge anyone for that, although I'm seeing his ownership spiking up just a little bit. But he's harder to put with Scheffler than he is with Rory, depending on what you want to do with the bottom. So I went with Scheffler, then Knapp and Jaeger from the bottom, and I used Adam Scott, Tommy Fleetwood, and Jason Day to round out my lineups. So it gives me the 12-3, 9-1, 8-7, 7-5. And you could turn that into Sung Jae. I mean, you could figure out a way to get like Sung Jae and Lowry into that lineup if you wanted to, or Sung Jae and Spieth. I think I like Henley more than I like Spieth, although Rasmus Højgaard does make a lot of sense to me. How do you feel about Bobby Mack? I tweeted out last week, it's just like, he can't keep doing this to me. I didn't end up betting him last week, and he ended up having the really nice week because he finally putted like normally, but his tee to green's been really solid.
I loved him last week. We talked about it tonight. It was a price that was kind of perfect, and that's how I see some of these other guys set up this week. So I have interest. Is there an option to take so one thing I noticed about this lineup you just built, like Scott, Fleetwood, Day, those guys to me kind of fit the mold of what we were trying to do at Pebble a few weeks ago when it did work out. Like if you pull Scottie, Knapp, and Jaeger out for their scoring upside and just how good they've been playing in different opportunities, can you keep like Day, Fleetwood, and then get, maybe you leave Scott, but get like Lowry and Rory, see what that looks like if we just converted it. Because you do get money back. Can't get Rory and Lowry, I don't think. But
no, you can't get Rory and Lowry. So let's just get rid of Rory for a second. So let's go Fleetwood Day Scott. So we have the Brit, we got 2 Aussies in the lineup, and let's take Lowry, throw him in. Now we're at 79.
It's like Bobby Mack with Minwoo or Mav or something. Do you like anybody else there, or do you like you like Zalatoris, Sepp? Is there something else that would fit better here that you kind of can get behind? It just depends on what you like.
Do you remember when Sepp had won Phoenix after the first 3 holes on Thursday?
I do remember that. Yes. Every Discord reminds you of that as well, right? It's no Sepp, no money.
Yeah, well, maybe this is actually the week to go back to him because it seems like people are a bit off of him. Like, what you could do is go like Rasmus at 83. And don't forget, his twin brother came second here at the Farmers 2 years ago. So maybe he does have the perfect skill set to play this. I was actually thinking about just using Dietrich again.
Yeah, there's always that topic of conversation. There is something interesting. It's like a long-term sample size of the winner from the previous week going up in price. Not good. When they go down in price, really good. Right? That's been a thing. He went from 72 up to 8K. It's not that much. He's still below average pricing. But if you go with Rasmus here, you could get get Harris English.
Yes, that's
find his way around here again.
You could get Harris English, or you could get Sam Stevens if that's the way that you wanted to go. I mean, Stan Stevens was a real hero of that chalk range last week because he was wildly outside the cut line and played himself into the weekend, just accruing more points along the way. If he doesn't make the cut, I actually have a really big week, it's so funny to think about, like, those little things that can happen to twist the dial. But him just getting through, because I had 0 Sam Stevens, that ended up becoming a problem for me. I would struggle playing Sam Stevens this week only because he's 7,600, and you just look at the names below him, you're like, oh, all those guys are probably better than Sam Stevens.
Yeah, and even the lineup you have up right now, it definitely fits way better the mold of what we're talking about with Harris English. Not just because he won at this course with different setup and with the North course involved and all that, but just the grinder type mentality. The other thing, Pat, that really stands out with this lineup is it's insane because it starts with Fleetwood. Like I said, you're never going to get that win equity that you're leaving off the board up top. But what you can get in a smaller field like this is if the Naps, the Gary Woodlands, the Patrick Rogers, those guys down low that people like to play.
Burger's a name this week that people are playing.
Sure. If they bust, though, is what I'm saying, then those other lineups don't matter. It's very unlikely that the 5 of 6 comes through, even if you have Scottie or Rory. It's like this type of lineup maybe grinds its way through, actually makes the cut, and then three or four of them are finding you the upside required, and the other 2 are scoring enough or coming along for the ride. These are how these types of builds, I should say, get there. That's how it works.
And basically what I've done is padded my lineup with a bunch of guys who grind to make pars.
Yes. And if you think it's a 9-under week, that can come in really handy because position placement points become so much more important. And that's what I'm saying. These guys can find you that versus you're not going to get to Scottie with 3 of Fleetwood and Lowry in there mixed in with them, or Jason Day. Like, then you just don't have any money left over. So it doesn't really work the other way. You need these guys to come through and the guys that fit with Scottie to fail. That's how that works, even if Scottie has a decent week.
Okay. So this one's not a winner, but I'm going to play it anyway, and we'll move on from there. Overall ownership, and like if we talk about like building in sets and what people are going to be doing, like I do see Rory as the most owned guy. After that, I have Pendrith. After Rory, then Scottie, 1 and 2. After that, I'm seeing Pendrith really stick out, and then you have that middle range. It seems like a lot of people are going to Victor, hoping for a rebound. Minwoo trying to ride from last week, and I'm seeing Zalatoris well below that. Maybe my numbers are off, but I found that kind of strange.
Yeah, I think a lot of people's numbers are off. You don't have good ownership projections this week, you're in big trouble going in, because this is going to be, I think a lot of people have this week very wrong. And that's why, like you mentioned, that optimal thing that I mentioned there, that's the key factor. Is like, I think people are just, I don't know why every other week, usually people have a good feel on it. Maybe it's because they're shook from Scottie coming off 60 or whatever that is. And that's kind of messing things up here. But again, the optimizer, having a process, going back through and looking into this stuff is how you learn this. And math is math, no matter what. At the end of the day, I think a lot of people are trying to fit pieces in. Like, I don't see Zal and Hovland getting anywhere near like Minwoo and Mav, for example, but yet everyone's mentioning it and saying it. So we'll see how it actually goes. But I like to think I have a pretty good track record at it, and I think this is going to be what I see. So we'll see how it actually shakes out.
So you think that Minwoo and McNeely end up with more ownership than Victor?
Yes.
Interesting. Do you think that without NFL, and you have people who either deposited last week, have money left over, that you do see a bleed over into names that people know a little bit more for this week because it is a bigger event? You have some of the star names that if I'm Joe DraftKings guy. And I'm like, hey, let's play a lineup in the $25 that I'm going to look at this range and be like, Victor Hovland, Min-Woo Lee, or Mav McNeely. I don't know who the two of those three guys are. I'll take Victor Hovland.
That's the only thing that interrupts everything that I just talked about. Yes, if that happens, that would definitely sway the numbers some and change it up. But I don't know if it actually makes it better. I think it actually is. It's better for, I think it's. I definitely think that would still help me and others that have the sort of a more inside track on what they're doing of who actually is the better plays in that range. Because if anything, it would just eat away from the options that actually are looking like they're popping for that reason now. If that makes sense.
How about some Scottie Rory lineups?
Scottie, Rory, Knapp starting?
It would have to be Scottie, Rory, Knapp. Kevin Yu, I think, is somewhat interesting here as well. Just he bombs it. If that's the route that you're going to go, bomb it. And he has actually, he's not a great putter, but he's putted relatively well on these surfaces in the past. He did pick up a win in the swing season as well. You could go like Knapp, Kevin Yu. Now you're back to 7,400 if you want to. You could take, you could throw Patrick Rogers back into there. If it's going to be an absolute grind fest, you could end up taking Mackenzie Hughes if you wanted. But I think I would lean more driving distance in this sense. But I could even throw Jagger back in there. Then you get back up to Rasmus.
Yeah,
or
that's
Burns.
An interesting one there. You like, I think Rasmus at that point though, right? The way you're playing the lineup, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Burns bombs it, man. He had really bad Friday or really bad Saturday in Phoenix and just took himself out of the tournament. But he's someone who, I remember when he should have won both the Farmers and Genesis in the same year and gagged them both down the stretch.
He's a guy that fits the mold of what we talked about. Like that's a weird, for him at 8,400, you would think he could be a lot more. Like him, Zal, Hovland, who else?
I would say Finau is there too. I saw he's working with Chris Como. He left his coach for the past 15 years, and now he's working with someone to figure out his swing a little bit. I mean, he's someone who has historically played very well at this venue, has been very good on the greens, very good around the greens. It's just his game just seems 30 degrees off right now, that if bringing in a new coach, even if it's just a 1 week type thing, even Michael Kim talked about last week that he went to go see Victor Hovland's boy, Joe Mayo, my cousin. Michael Kim's a part of the Mayo family now, it does seem, but they worked on his chipping and changing his angle of attack around the greens for the POA surfaces. And he's like, I made one bogey all week. I put everything super close. He's like, it really worked. Like sometimes a little tweak like that gets guys. Remember when Rory suggested Scottie use a new putter and then he couldn't lose?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's I remember that for sure. And everybody wanted to post about it because it was Rory gave away the secrets, man. He gave Scottie the goods. But now last week, Scottie misses 1 4-footer and it's like Space Jam and the Monstars came in and took all his skills, right? So that's how it always works, the flip-flop of the narratives.
So with Finau, maybe going to see Como and figuring a few things out with his swing is exactly what he needs just to get himself back on to where he was. And if he's back onto where he was, this was the same guy last year for the first 3.5 months of the season. I think he was second to Scheffler in ball striking. He just couldn't make a 3-foot putt. The putting's been okay for him so far. Even at Pebble, the only reason he had a good result was because he chipped and putted well. That maybe if he can figure out the rest of the ball striking and he gets himself back on track, that I don't know if he wins, but he's someone who I don't think a lot of people are going to this week that would fill out this lineup pretty well.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm looking at. Like if you go to a build that has something like that, like for example, you can land on, I put in Burns, Zalatoris, Hovland, and Finau as sort of the guys that, if they play to their ability, are just way above those prices. So it's 84 down to 79. It's Burns, Finau at 8,200, both Zal and Hovland at 79. Then there's a few different ways you can go, but of the top, I don't know if you think, okay, Justin Thomas is the one because he's actually playing good right now. He's still cheaper than Rory. He gets you in a better range. That would land you on something like Adam Scott or Thigala. Who do you think is worse? Who do you think should be more than 7,500? Adam Scott or Thigala?
With the way Thigala is playing right now, it's probably Adam Scott.
Agreed. So that's, I guess, depends on how much of an Adam Scott person you are. I think that's kind of a very certain niche, if you will, of people that go there. But I think Adam Scott's a great play. And at 7,500, you talked about him a little bit earlier, but that's just one example. If you go to Rory, you can almost do the Rory Max Homa thing and leave a couple $100. Do you think Max is back? Do you think Max can find his way around?
I don't think that Max, after missing the cut by 11 billion strokes, I don't think that Max is back just because some of his data looks good off the tee.
He had an interview. He said it's the best he's ever hit it.
Well, that's great. That's great news. Good for him.
Well, All right. So out on Max, that solves that. Who anybody down in the 6K range that you think is bad? Like Billy Horschel, 67, after hurting everybody's feelings. Bez, Rye.
I would say it's probably Rye. I think Rye fits sort of the type of player that we were looking at. And he kind of he is sort of the one where obviously he is not long off the tee, but he's not going to put himself into a ton of danger off the tee either. If the rough really is that detrimental, I know he can get up and down, at least chip it close. I don't know if he can make the putts, but he's had some good run at this course in the past as well. I was actually looking at the 2v2s that you were talking about, be it JT and Scott, or if it would have to be like Eckroat and Rory, that Dietrich and Matsuyama actually are the 2v2 to that.
Oh, wow. That's a good one. Matsuyama, certainly, like you could definitely have seen him be more, and Dietrich coming off the win. Even Sepp would fit it, though, just of note. I mean, whoever you land on there, I don't really care. I think it's a fair statement and something interesting to bring up. The one thing about this lineup, Pat, is it's super unique in that if Min Woo and McNeely come in as the ownership and you've got Zal and Hovland right above, and it does flip that way, and then you've got most people playing Rasmus, who I put into that one earlier, and you've got Burns above and Finau below. This is a very high leverage lineup where you can kind of land wherever you want at the end. So I love the Sepp Matsuyama just going completely off the board, but I also wouldn't hate at this point with how leveraged you are if you did even land on like a Rory Woodland, just because, again, they're both popular and probably for good reason. Without, like, Gary's been playing very good golf right now, especially for 6,600. But just saying, if you did land there, I wouldn't hurt you because you're so high leverage up the middle. That's how I look at it.
Soft points that I'm seeing right now in the ownership, just guys that no one is really going to, at least by my numbers. Of the very top end guys, it does seem like Thomas will be slightly lower than Morikawa, but on par with Ludwig and Hideki. Cantlay seems a little bit low. Tom Kim seems like he's going to be relatively unowned to me.
Yes. Yeah, I'm seeing like 5 to 10% range.
Yeah, and then Spieth and Burns are kind of the same way as well. Versus Højgaard, Bobby Mack, and Finau, and even Henley, Day, and Lowry. Like it's not like they're 1% owned, but if the other group is 10 to 13, they're like 5 to 10.
I don't think anyone's really in on Spieth or following that up or trying to chase. So it does feel like Burns.
I was in on Spieth last week. I think I talked you into Spieth a little bit. Can I talk?
We literally talked ourselves into a Scottie Spieth playoff. Is what we were.
Hey, listen. If Dietrich doesn't exist, I think we get it.
It's possible. I put a small bet on the straight forecast both ways, just because I was like, man, we talked about it. Maybe it just comes to fruition. They were playing some good golf. On Sunday morning, I was like, okay, this is kind of interesting when Scottie starts going off early, but then obviously that disappeared. So yeah, I'm with you. And Dietrich effect overall, but. Yeah, I don't know if we should be in on Spieth or not. To your point, I don't think many are off of just that one good result last week. It doesn't feel like anyone's chasing that or following it up.
And this is not necessarily the course where I want to play Spieth at. Although if it's grinding out miraculous pars, maybe it's the perfect place to play Jordan Spieth.
Anyone that's not a super bomber is going to be at least somewhat under-owned compared to who's around them. Right? I agree. Is shaping up early. That's which is
the funniest thing, because of all of these 7K guys, I guess Mark Hubbard is probably the lowest owned because he's just wild. Like, he should be $6,300 in this field, and he's 73 for some reason. But
yeah,
I don't understand if bomber is the narrative. One of the two longest hitters right now is sub 5%, and it's Ben An. Probably because he's talking about how he can't putt, and he can't putt. That's a problem. But tee to green and driving distance, like, Ben An's made for this course.
Yeah, I think it's at least somewhat interesting for that reason. He's probably coming in 5-6% owned, it looks like, early. So we'll have to wait and see. Maybe it gets a little boost, but he's right there at 7,700.
I don't think that it is going to get a super boost. Listen, he's not hitting his irons well right now. He's not putting. He's driving it and he's chipping. But there's no real difference. Like, when you line up their stats next to each other and to see exactly what's going on. Like, Min Woo is going to drive it and chip it well, and he may or may not putt, and he's not going to hit his irons well. Ben An is exactly the same thing, except he's like 1/5 the ownership and cheaper.
Yeah, he's 7,700, so he would definitely fit the mold of kind of what we just had on the board too. I think we forgot about Wyndham Clark in that model, and you could have had Rory with Hovland, Zal, Finau, and instead of Burns and whoever, you could have went to Wyndham Clark and Benny Ann is another option in that previous build you just had.
Clark, Ben Ann. I really do like Max Razorman this week too. He's someone who I thought missed the cut last week, and it turned out he didn't miss the cut. He actually grinded. He pulled a Sam Stevens and got himself through.
Yeah.
And it's funny because last week it was all about like, hey, it's Scottie with all the low sevens guys. And now this week, no one's playing any of the low sevens guys. It does seem outside of like Adam Scott, I do think is going to draw a bit of interest. Wyndham Clark, like you mentioned, he probably will. But I think after that, like people are just going to drop down to the sixes and find a punt or play Daniel Berger or something like that.
Yeah, I actually feel like another one that's close on, or maybe others are off on, but I think JT Poston gets a boost. I know it's a much stronger field than we've seen him at those price points, but there was literally multiple fields where we were playing JT Poston. People were playing him at 9,500. And again, strength of field, I understand all this. I'm explaining from this perspective, it's more of a testament to when those weak fields come around and people are still willing to play a guy like JT Poston at the big number, 9,500. That tells me they're really going to enjoy him or want to play him when he's super cheap, regardless of the field strength. So I think Poston, Grazerman, Siwoo are a few of the options down low, maybe even Spawn if people can get over the illness. But I think this lower sevens is going to be in check. But those would be the guys that I would see have the ownership if there is going to be ownership down there.
So I have no real interest in playing JT Poston. You can call him like cheaper Russell Henley, and maybe he comes through. He could fit that Harris English mold and come through with a win. I mean, I played JT Poston last week. I bet JT Poston last week, and the putting was better, but just a lot of short misses. There's going to be a lot of short misses at this course anyway. But he kind of leans on what we talked about earlier. Like it's decidedly not a bomber, and that's going to be a problem for him.
Yeah, I mean, it's a one back to what we just talked about earlier, but with like the skill set stacks or whatever you want to call it, or sets. It's like you can fit in like a Russell Henley or a JT Poston for cheaper and say, okay, I'm going to do that, but I'm not going to run out to build a bunch of lineups that have, Poston, Spieth, Henley, like all the guys that need that magic to happen versus, mixing them in here and there. That's how I would approach it, at least for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Berger is the name that people land on just because he's cheaper than those guys, and he does have a little bit of extra distance over those guys, and he's playing. Obviously, we just saw him come in second place in Phoenix, and the TV ratings were up. Tambo, despite it being a runaway, which I was shocked about. Spieth being in the mix. Spieth just being there. Did you see that they were?
Yeah, did you see they were still way down though, like 1.1 million less than previous years?
Well, it was up 30% over last year is what I saw.
Right. But then like of what it used to be, they started showing like 20, 23, 22, 21, 20, and it's still way, way down versus what golf used to be. So
yeah, no,
I don't know. I'm just tired of the rating stuff. I don't really care. I also think this is my thing. I think golf ratings are insane. I think it's like literally my dad is a prime example, someone who just turns it on. They get the rating. He doesn't watch shit necessarily, and it's just on. It just sits on the TV. Tons of people. My grandmother used to do it. Just throw the golf on and go on with your day. You're not sitting down there glued to the TV for 7 hours, 6 hours, whatever coverage you'll actually give us. So it is what it is. It's golf, man. Just enjoy it.
I'm looking at Glover. So I built a lot of these low sevens guys, just three of them that they've been on the screen. Wyndham Clark, Grazerman, and Scam Young. Let's throw him on there too, because he's another bomber who can maybe figure it out this week. Hopefully he just makes the cut and that will be good enough. So
I have your closeout that you love for this.
Oh, hit me.
It's your boy Bobby Mack, your boy Tommy Fleetwood, and you just land on Rory.
That's actually not bad.
Well, it's just an example. I mean, again, you're already different enough at the bottom, but it's not like people are going to be in on or heavy in on Fleetwood or Mack and Fleetwood Mac. Your boy, get that going. Return of the Mac. Fleetwood Mac, you got these guys in there, and then you just sort of land on Rory, but you already have completely low-owned options pretty much everywhere else, or at least held in check, even if some of these ranges get boosted a little bit.
Rather play Zal than play Bobby Mack, so I'll do that, and that leaves me 200. That means I could move up Fleetwood to Sung Jae is the only possible option with that, and I think that they're kind of a coin flip to me. I don't know. I feel like I'm going out of my way to not play Pendrith because Pendrith actually makes a ton of sense in this lineup as well, just based on the sort of U.S. Open type player, big off the tee type player that I'm looking for. Now, Fleetwood, I would consider to be he's kind of plus at everything. Like he's sort of he doesn't have the win, so he can't be the Johnny Bananas of the PGA Tour, but he's just kind of above average at everything, and that is really good for this style of course. Whereas Pendrith, he has his deficiencies, be it sometimes with his long iron, sometimes with his around the green play, but he's sort of, the way that he's playing right now is like the advanced version of the Ben An, Min Woo type guy. He's going to be plus off the tee. He's going to be good with his wedges, and it seems like he's going to make a ton of putts. And that's what everyone is banking on right now. So I think he actually fits this lineup a little bit better.
Yeah, but if you do go to, if you were okay with Pendrith, you get to go back to your guy Finau talking about all the Chris Como stuff. You just move off Zal and get Finau, and you close it out.
I mean, I did bet Zal to win. I used him as my one and done too. I really like Zalatoris this week.
Yeah, I like him a lot more at DFS than winning.
I mean, this is the tournament. Well, this was the not the Genesis, but the Farmers 3 years ago. The less Zal playoff, the most profitable playoff I've ever had.
The tiers, man, the first ever Zal tiers we got to see. It was unfortunate, but remember, it was Luke List breakthrough. So like he was the one that was having the emotions, and I think he barely gave props to Zal. He just had to get to the family. It was like a crowning moment. Finally got it done. This was huge. So I remember the event. It was an amazing playoff. The way it shook out was great, and Luke List finally made a putt and got the job done. So that was a good one for sure. And yeah, Zal can show up here, but that's why I like him in DFS 7,900 versus having to worry about him actually winning. That's nothing to just play him at 7,900. I just thought your Finau call earlier, like your calls today are Finau and Fleetwood, and that was a way to get them both in there. If you went Finau, Fleetwood, Rory, you could end up getting like Grazerman, Young, and one other person. Like your guy Siwoo could fit there or something.
So you can almost build the exact same lineup if you wanted to use Finau. You know what? I don't even need to use Finau. The one other guy I do like from this range, because you keep mentioning, like, I don't love Victor this week. I know that like people seem to. I understand like what the price point is. I don't love Minwoo. I don't love McNeely. Like I just have no interest in those guys, especially around some of the other names. It's Keegan right below them that I can see myself going to. And I can build that lineup almost like it's basically a 2v2 of what I just did. You keep in Grazerman, Clark, Cam Young, and Zalatoris, and you turn Rory and Fleetwood into Scheffler and Keegan.
Clark. And then who's your one other guy I'm missing? Cam Young with $200.
Yeah. I mean, you can turn Cam Young into Adam Scott if you really want to, or Harris English or Sam Stevens or Thigala. Like you have $200 to play with, but that's where I would be at. I like, this is the lineup that I kind of like. It's the exact lineup that everyone made last week that no one is making this week.
Yes. Scottie with 7K guys, most of which are very low. Yep. Agreed. That's another thing to go back and look at. Like that would make sense for here. There's some cut equity. You're also still good if some of those 6K guys don't come through, like you mentioned, that people will get. It's not like they're going to be high owned. I'm just saying of who becomes popular down there. If it's Rogers, Woodland, Berger, those guys you mentioned, if they don't come through and it's instead Wyndham Clark, Razorman, those guys. But the $7,700 conundrum you mentioned, like you just talked about Keegan after earlier making the case for Ann, you can play them both together. It's hard to pick when you land in that range. That's going to be a make or break range, or you could just skip over it completely because some form of ownership between Zal, Hovland, Mav, Minwoo, Keegan are there. And then I think Ann is probably the lower owned of the bunch, but I get why he would make a ton of sense too. And he hurt a lot of feelings as well last week, mine included. So I think he's an option there at 7,700 also.
And Feinberg's yelling at him on Twitter right now. So don't forget that. Yes. The anti-Feinberg bump.
The over the putter, because he said, what about someone who does aim point and has the long putter?
Yeah.
And the answer is like, you should literally try a hockey stick instead, because neither are obviously working for you, but he should know that by now.
If you have questions, dump them in the chat right now. I'm going to go back and scan through them. I did want to mention too, I forgot to mention this in the live or the betting portion of the show. I bet the Burmista Mista lady on live at 25-1. I was thinking about adding Gooch at 50 as well. Just two guys that played really well here last year. Good at this style of course. Vincenzi actually even put out that Brendan Steele won here last year, and you go back and look at the results of who's done well at Live Adelaide so far, because this is basically their signature event on Live. It's all the guys that used to dominate Silverado. So I joked that Homa should just go to Live if he wants to go get another win.
Homa might be going to Live. His statement in that little press conference they put out there yesterday, they said even he dropped like a little line, like even if I don't ever get to have this again, I know that I put my best work and my hard work forward. So I'll still know that I always have that. Maybe he's taking the contract. I saw a big thing that new contracts are coming up, and it seems like Brooks is still in, but maybe what if Bryson is out, right? He rocks the Crushers, but what if his contract comes up and he decides he's out? That could be a thing.
Well, Brooks and Bryson are both up contract-wise. So you said like Brooks
Yeah.
looks like he's staying, but maybe like I was trying to think of like, 'cause it's going to be weird. Like these guys collected $200 million and they're trying to come back to the PGA Tour. Here's what you do is that if you want to have your PGA Tour card back and your Bryson and your Brooks, they need to be able to leverage those guys into boosting up other tournaments. So like for the first 2 years that you're back, you have to play the John Deere once, the Canadian Open once, Mexico once, and just send them to like goober tournaments and they can split them up.
But I don't think they have any leverage because how much like those guys get to play the majors. So like for them, they're like, oh, you're going to force me to play the John Deere, or I can collect another 200 million over here and just keep rolling because who really gives a shit? That's how I think it is. And Bryson has been on live, rocking the brands, getting sponsorships, making the cash, definitely up for a huge renewal. They actually have the money to pay it. And he's still going to get to go back and win the trophy and run through the crowd with it and be the hero out on YouTube. So I don't know how much leverage the PGA Tour has on these guys. Those guys specifically.
I just think that they want to come back.
And we'll see.
All right.
It's hard, man. It's hard. Same as they went there in the first place. These are big boy offers, 9-figure offers that everyone wants to shit on. It's like you never even had a 7-figure offer. So what are you going to do in a 9-figure across your table? You don't know because it's probably not going to cross your table. So however people feel about it is what it is. But I would never judge someone when it's something we could never relate to.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, you even mentioned it. I mean, I'll tell you that like you have a lot of morals and you have a lot of like, hey, what you want to talk about versus what you don't want to talk about. And someone does slide you a 7-figure deal across the table. You look at it and you're like, sure, in. Sign.
You never know. That's what I say. You just never know who the person is. People could say whatever they want to say, but like you just have no idea and you're not in anywhere near the headspace to know what that's like when you're sitting down with your wife and kids at night. Like imagine like a guy like Tony Finau having to make that decision. Definitely offer came through. You know, he went again. He obviously didn't take an offer, but you have to think he got a pretty hefty one. And he's got all kinds of decisions to make and then decided against it, right? But that had to be a tough decision for a lot of these guys. Justin Rose, we saw him on every freaking commercial there's ever been made in the world, doing stuff, eating ice cream cones, weird, all kinds of shit, and getting an offer that he got and saying no to it. I mean, some obviously stick to their guns. Others just went with it because it's life-changing, insane money. So hard to judge or know what really goes on.
Oh, I just looked in the chat. There's one guy posting like 8,000 things. He might have to get banned for life because I don't like that in my chat. Don't like it at all. It's not your chat. It's Pat's chat. So you fuck off with your non-questions. It's for questions only. Don't like it. Too much in there. But you need to be subbed to the channel in order to make your comment. So thank you for subbing. Smash the like while you're here before you fuck off and get banned for life. Jeffrey Feinberg is first up in the chat. He says, what's the cut? Did I lose $1,000? You did not lose $1,000, Jeff Feinberg. The cut is what we thought it was, top 50 and ties. Plus, Tambo, anyone within 10 strokes of the lead as well gets in. It's the old Masters cut line rule.
Yeah. Do you think it's going to come into play this week?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, this one would actually make sense because it's not like you think that maybe someone has a hot 2 rounds, but if the leader's like 5 under after 2 rounds, you could see that.
Dietrich meditates before round 1 and just breaks the slate again, goes off. He's like 12, 13 under through 2 days somehow. That would be how it's done, right?
That would be it. Yes. Let's see. Jesse, people are clogging up the strat. People are clogging up the chat with stuff that isn't questions. Any Cam Davis love? This is from Davis. David, not Davis. Although Davis is probably in the chat too. But Cam Davis love. Do you like Cam Davis? Because I prefer him at shorter courses over longer courses, by and large.
I think he's fine. 6,800 price point is good. Let sort of squeeze there, right? If people are going to go to Berger, they're going to play maybe. I don't know if they go to Denny McCarthy, but they're definitely going to go to Woodland and guys down below him. So I think that is when you did the soft ranges thing earlier, Pat. I kind of like that. We've been going through and picking the spots where you see it. We don't always go down the entire board, but I definitely think under that 7K range with like Siwoo and Grazerman and JT Poston and some of those guys, when it's Berger and Gary Woodland, there has to be a little bit of that range in between that gets squeezed of like Novak, Davis, Fitzpatrick, who kind of could have fit that mold we talked about earlier too. Billy Horschel hurt feelings last week, 20% on last week, nothing probably this week. Bez played pretty good last week. So I just don't see a lot of people landing there, and Davis would fit the mold. So if you do land there, I wouldn't hate it.
So I was actually kind of shocked to see how low Jake Knapp's ownership is. I just figured people would play him. Maybe I'll just have to play him. And
we'll have to see what actually ends up happening. So he came into the field late because of the Tiger WD. So maybe that's part of just the early builds, the early ownership projections, the things that you're seeing generated. over there. So I definitely think it's possible that we end up seeing it higher.
Yeah, because his favorite percentage is much higher than the guys around him. And he is projected slightly above like the Nico Echeverias, the Nick Dunlaps, the Mathieu Pavons, Paul Bet Pavon. I don't hate his logic behind it either. Dude won here 2 years ago. It is 350 to 1 against 72 guys.
Yeah. I don't know. Like he's kind of was a super outlier in the beginning, right? That how it even happened and then kept it up for a week. He's like the Dietrich example. Not that even close, because Dietrich's a different talent, but obviously everyone shit on Dietrich, how he could never close on the Sunday and then goes out and finally gets it done in pretty good fashion. What if Dietrich just continues that this week? And you mentioned it earlier at 8K playing him and things like that. But I definitely think there's something to that about going back to the guy the next week. Just there has been a thing in the past where when their price goes up, they don't perform. I've got no interest, but people did like the pronunciation of Mathieu Pavon. That's the name, right?
Right, that's how you say it. It's Mathieu Pavon. And if you look at what he's done so far, basically since he won and every single start this year, like dude hits irons like I do now, which is not conducive to doing well on the PGA Tour. He's minus 4.6, minus 6, minus 3.8, minus 5. At least but he's putting the lights out right now, which is interesting. He's still gaining off the tee in all these tournaments, but the irons and chipping have gone to shit. But when you go back and look at him last year, we saw bouts of this as well. But the putter and driver was like as equally as bad as the rest of his game. But you just look at where he played well and how he did against some of these stronger fields. Obviously, it wasn't all of them, but he was T16 at Travelers, which was an elevated event. He was 5th at the U.S. Open. He obviously won this event, then followed it up in the elevated event with the T3, only in 54 rounds at Pebble Beach. He was 12th at the Masters. Like he does have some high finishes against good fields. It's just against the crappy fields, he doesn't do anything.
That's what's always tricky, right? Strength of field matters a ton, and that's where you can sort of gather some of this information from and see it. But I think that's the one people struggle with some of these guys when they're looking at them.
Jack Fisher does ask, what has happened to Matthew Fitzpatrick? His form's fallen off a cliff. Another 6 months and he'll be out of the top 100, currently number 57. I mean, this happens. Like we watch this happen with, I mean, maybe not this bad for Thomas, but like we watched this happen with Spieth. We watched this happen with Ricky. It happens to some of the top end players. Like it's either a swing change. Hell, he's playing with a weight in his driver for 3 months last year. Like something is clearly off with him.
Yeah. 30 years old is what it is. He turned 30 and he's done. Cooked.
You know what? The moment he took his braces off, he got bad.
That might be it.
Do you think he's going to make the Ryder Cup team?
As of now, I don't know. I'm never up on that stuff or good enough with clarifying those things. Like, what would it be right now? Who would you have? I guess there's definitely other options. That's for sure. That's the one thing that would take away from it.
Mm-hmm. Maddie asks, what will be the biggest difference between the course this week and the course a few weeks ago? Longer rough, wetter? Do you think it plays tougher this week? It does seem like the rough is a little bit longer, although the rough was really long 2 weeks ago. That, I don't know. I think it's going to play slightly longer. If it is wetter, it will most definitely play longer because you won't get all that rollout. And it's going to be colder, it seems, than it was 2 weeks ago, too. So I just think overall it does play tougher. I would want to see it play tougher. I don't want to see the same tournament played twice in a row. And then at the same time, I want to see the better players play more difficult venues. So I think the Torrey Pines is the perfect spot to do that at.
Yeah. And I think that's, what you said there is perfect. And to answer his question, it's everything you said. It's like they're leaving the rough. It's going to be wetter coming in. There's water, rain, coming in the night before to make it a little bit wetter on that first round. If the wind is up, like we've seen it right now, it's kind of a steady 13 to 15 miles per hour with gusts up to 25. It's just going to be a grinded out type event by the looks of it. And that's sort of the full setup, and you're getting it for all 4 rounds. So maybe the weekend gets a little bit, but then it's the weekend pins and all this stuff. So yeah, I'm with you. I just think it's gonna be a lot more of a grinded out type of event, but I think distance matters more than what we saw last time, even more so, because if it's wet, playing longer, getting out of that rough, all those factors. So I do lean more to the Bombers, even though I know most do. You can build those types of lineups like I talked about and still fit in whoever your choice is to round it out if you want and get away with it that way. No problem.
PD asks, do you think that starting Rory Scottie is going to be popular? I do not.
No.
Although we built that lineup, it didn't look too bad.
That's easy to do. It's easy to build that way. I don't, he has it's going to be popular. I think if you check it out after the fact, I don't think it's like one of the top stacks that people are going to where you're putting 2 golfers together that are a common combination, I should say.
Andrew asks, is Jason Day not going to be chalk? I don't think so.
I have him somewhere around 10% right now. So definitely, again, it's all relative to who's around him. I think there's going to be a lot more people on Rasmus, maybe even on Sam Burns down below, Pendrith above, Jason Day, probably a really good play this week. Just, based on all those other factors, he looks like a good option at 8,700.
Ryan Shepard, the River, asks, is Brian Harman too short to be played comfortably this week? I would say yes. Plus, it's Brian Harman. It's not a Brian
Harman. This guy's perfect for this course. He's the guy. He would definitely fit the mold of, like, if you're putting your last guy in and it lands on him, I'm fine with it. I know it's bad versus what's around him at 6,300. Like, do you want to play Patrick Rogers again? Sure. I get that too. Michael Kim? Sure. Yeah. But, like, if you end up as him as your last guy with a bunch of bombers in there, you could just round it out with another bomber, or you could play Brian Parman and hope he does make those pars for you and grind it out and come through. I'm not super excited about him, but I definitely think that's why, the conversation is out there if you are even considering him. Shout out to Rin. He's just mad that EVR is not in the field this week. That's his boy.
Maddie also asked, what do you consider low ownership for Scheffler?
I don't know. I don't even care.
Do you think he ends up sub 30? I do.
No. I
just think Rory's going to be through the roof.
There's definitely a possibility Rory and him are matched, but it's at a bigger number. It's like 35 each or something, or 38 each, or so, if that happens, I think. But I still have Scottie higher than Rory.
Are people overlooking Akshay Bhatia worth a play with the low ownership? He kind of goes by. I mean, he's so bad around the greens that would, like, when we think about where Akshay has played really well. Now, he's going to be wildly accurate, but he's not long off the tee, which is a problem. He is not great out of the rough, although, maybe he can get through it. Like at Valero, he was able to chip in, but those are a lot of runoff areas, not thick rough, and he hit more greens in regulation than everyone else. Like, that is his path to victory. I don't necessarily know if Akshay is going to win a lot of, like, grind fest. I think he's going to win a lot of birdie fests.
Yeah, he's going to win a lot of birdie fests. He's going to score well for you in a lot of birdie fests, because he's definitely he's not like someone you view as a position placements guy. He's not going to find his way up the board and get you all those points that way and make a bunch of pars and come through. He's going to be a guy that, even if he's going to have a one really good round and then equally, or like a okay round in round two to make the cut and then score for you over the weekend at a birdie fest, or he's going to have a good run or whatever it might be, the whole thing. But it's going to be more in scoring events because he just goes balls to the wall. He's going to go all in and it works in your favor. When that happens, it really hurts you. When it doesn't, it doesn't seem like the best course fit, at least for this event here.
Oh, this goober in the chat tells me to shut the fuck up and put my money on Siwoo. Like, what are you, like a brand new fucking born to this earth person? Like, you only know who Siwoo Kim is because of me, pal. So fuck right off. Is Cam Young broken? Hasn't had positive strokes gained on approach in a round in 2025. I mean, that's always been kind of his thing. He can't hit approach shots. Drives it. He can putt a little bit sometimes, or it's a disaster. And chips pretty well, but I do think where, like, approach play is obviously going to be important if you can figure it out here. But these are somewhat smaller greens than we're used to seeing, like just right around average on the PGA Tour. It's a tough putting contest that I do think that like when you take a look at the overall strokes gained of like the top 10 finishers from this tournament, it's more of a flat bar graph than you normally see at a tournament where it's like driving, chipping, approach, and putting. Like, those two things matter. You can cobble it together anyway, but just having an overall balanced type of game really does go a long way. So if you can chip yourself out of problems here, obviously it's more stress on your game. But if playing for par and not birdie is the essential thing, I do think approach means a little bit less. Hopefully he can figure that out and not be a disaster. If you're a disaster with your irons, you're not going to win or even come close. But if you can just be like neutral, then it's not so bad.
Yeah, the problem with him that I know a lot of people are struggling with is you probably have the numbers up there somewhere, but I know in round 2 and round 4 last week, he gained like 1 million strokes putting, and then he still didn't even finish in the top 10 for the tournament on the week. So, if he's putting that well as he did last week and then still not even making it happen, what's this week going to be like if the putter's not there? That's what people are considering.
Yeah, but I do think this course suits him a little bit better anyway off the tee. And listen, I don't love Cameron Young. He was just sort of a collection of those guys at the bottom. I like Grazerman better. I like Clark better. I like Scott better of that bunch, but he just kind of fits the mold. It'd be like playing Ben An this week. Like, there's nothing that points to Ben An doing well, but skill-wise, this is a course where he should do well, and then you take that risk on it. And the guy in the chat lied. He gained 0.3 strokes on approach in the second round of the Century.
There you go. Oh, wow.
So
The century.
once in 16 rounds this year, he has
Yeah, I was
gained
going to say,
on
we're going
approach.
back for that one a minute, but I guess I got to retract for 1 second just to go back to it, because you just said the thing about Cam Young and obviously fitting the course. I went and just pulled up the course fit rankings over at Ship It Nation, and I got to dig into this because you know who actually does, like Siwoo and Cam Young both rate out pretty good. That would make sense to me. They kind of fit this course. It all sets up, but Akshay
they both
is not bad for some reason.
Well, no, because he's so good off the tee, right? But he's good off the tee just the same way that Siwoo is. Like, they don't hit it a ton, but they hit every fairway. I assume Morikawa rates out really well on it too.
Let me go check for you.
Like, if you wanted to build skill stacks, like Morikawa would be paired up with Sungjae. You have like Morikawa, Sungjae, Hideki as like the top end version. Henley,
Sungjae, Hideki are very good. Morikawa is behind them, but Sungjae and Hideki very good. Rory very good. Jason Day very good. Finau, your boy, very good. Zal, really good. Yeah, like it's fitting with a lot of what we liked and talked about. It's just I was surprised by the Akshay one, and then trying to put 2 and 2 together on what it was. But you just said it with like the off the tee stuff and kind of just what version do you get out there over the weekend and whatnot if he can make the cut for you.
Yeah, and weirdly enough, like when we talk about, he does do his best work on POA putting, but honestly, this year, Akshay's been all putting. That's the only reason he has any sort of. He doesn't have a top 20 so far this season, and he's gained at least 3 strokes putting in 2 of his past 3 starts. He's gaining marginally on approach. He's losing off the tee, and he is a disaster around the greens. This just the toughness of this tournament, I feel like, takes me out of it a little bit with him. And part of those course fit rankings, I'm guessing, because all the guys that you mentioned are guys that typically play the Farmers and do well, that there is something that is baked into the course history too. Because I think if you were trying to draw up a player who would fit this course the best, his name would be Scottie Scheffler.
Yes. And then the other factor to it that I thought you were going to say that I'll just add on because you said it, but just another piece that you were going there is it also is kind of like considering all that stuff. You do have to take it in for sort of what the player is doing right now with their game. It's more of like if they were, I don't want to say it exactly like this, but it's like if they're on their game, who fits this course the best? If someone's not on their game, they could still be a course fit ranking, but not be in their, the form ranking that you're looking for type of thing, if you will.
Wright says, who do we think are the most owned guys in one and done? I will suggest you to return to 1807 of the show where we talk about the most popular guys in the one and done. Favorite way to get different from Stevens and Scott? I mean, Scott, maybe. I don't think Stevens is going to be that popular.
Yeah, I think Stevens will be. Yeah, it's going to be. I think Stevens will be lower owned than Scott.
Yeah, and like you said, Minwoo and Mav seem to be generating a bunch of interest in there as well. I do think that Keegan is the answer, or those guys below, like I talk about. Grazerman, the more I talk through it and look at his ownership number, I think he comes in single digits, and he's been playing better golf than I think the people realize. It's just not as good as what we saw, what he was doing against like scrubs in the swing season.
Agreed. Yeah, I think that's what we put him in there earlier. We thought about it. I think he kind of makes some sense, but it's still going to be, I still think like guys around him, like Siwoo and Poston and those guys will get a little bit of love. But I also think it's important to know as well that what we talked about earlier, like it's all how every tournament's different and how you see it playing out. If this is a week where you think the scoring isn't going to be as prevalent and it's going to be like a 9 under type winner, position placement points matter way more than a made cut. Like if you're just going to play a cheap guy, be like, oh, I just need him to make the cut for me. Absolutely not. You're done. Like there's no chance. If it's going to be 9 under, if they make the cut and come in 50th for you, useless. Like 6, it doesn't even matter at that point. So you're going to want the opportunity to have guys again. And that's what I said earlier, Pat, where the Scottie stuff and the Rory stuff can go to shit is if you get the cut made. I mean, first of all, guys like Woodland, Rogers, Berger, those guys could miss the cut. But second of all, is if they make the cut, but don't have any of that upside for you or anything that gets you some of the scoring to get you to those position placement points that you might need or probably need, then you're going to be in trouble versus some of those more balanced builds that have the made cut and then they're all hovering in the top 20 and 1 or 2 of them sneak into the win in second place or something. And then those lineups end up crushing. That's the difference maker for a week like this.
The only pushback I would give you on that is that the Bombers at the very low end of the field, if they do make the cut, even if it plays more difficult, there's still 3 very gettable par 5s here where you can make eagles that you can go like eagle triple and you still want that in your DraftKings lineup.
For sure. That's the counterbalance. So that's something, first off, they have to make the cut. Then
Yeah.
that has to happen for them. And that's also most likely paired with Scottie or Rory. So that's the main point on that versus like when you were building lineups earlier that had, let's say, Wyndham Clark, Zalatoris, Hovland. Like there's definitely a world where those guys find their game for 1 week. It's golf. I know there's no way because the numbers say it can't happen. But if they do and they're in the top 10, those lineups are really going to hurt the ones down below with the 6K guys if they miss the cut or are really struggling and that type of thing with the Scottie and Rory up top, on top of needing Scottie and Rory to be the guys that are the ones that come through, which is obviously much more likely, just saying it.
Another question from the chat. Let's find it here. Where did the chat go? It's about Eric Cole. Did Eric Cole play this course well last time out? Good enough to make the cut and pay off the $6,100 salary? Well, that goes back to Eric Cole is like the exact person you just mentioned, that even if he makes the cut, becomes T47, he's just not going to score whatsoever.
Yeah.
At least Knapp has like eagle outs. Jagger and Patrick Rogers have the distance to generate those higher scoring leverage shots. But no, Cole did not play that well last time out. He did make the cut at the Farmers against a significantly weaker field, and I think he came outside of the top 60 after all was said and done. So this is not a course where I would look at it and be like, Eric Cole, he would have to putt so well and chip so well this week in order just to contend with these guys to be like mentioned on the leaderboard by the time Sunday came around. Like these are not the type of courses where he's going to play great. I don't think at least.
Yeah, and it ties into like the question of like stars and scrubs or balance builds too. That's exactly the other thing we just talked about and compared it to, because that's the whole point. What we're saying is like how that works is if you get the right scrub, which just talking from a price perspective, not the players. There's not really many scrubs in this field. They're all pretty good players down there, except the guy named D List. I don't know if you want to play anybody on the D list, but Danny List is down there at 6K flat. I know not a lot of love for him this week, but just in general, you're going to be.
Is anyone, unless like he's playing DraftKings this week while being in the tournament, how could anyone ever click on Danny List?
They're not. They're going to play Jake Knapp.
No, but like he should be literally 0% owned. Like he's in this field as like a sponsor's exemption, winning on that the other tour that Tiger sponsors. That's why he gets an invite into Tiger's tournament. Like he's not. I think he's ranked like 1300th in the world or something.
Yeah, we're getting close to the end. So I just said, well, I'll say this to you. I have a quick, just throw it to you and see what you think. But my guy Hoop yesterday made a pretty funny joke, I thought. But he said, if you're going to dress like Ricky Fowler did last week, come out and suck, and then give up and WD, you should be given a 5K range. Like just make you 5,900. D-List could go down there with them or whatever. But it was pretty funny. Like, Ricky came out in the camouflage suit, all ready to go and take on and go to war. Sucked, and then WDs. He's like, they should just make a 5K range for anyone who tries to pull that shit off.
All right, rapid fire these last few questions. Is the field too good for Sam Stevens to be highly owned? I think so. I just think that people I just think that people look at the other options next to him and be like, rather play Adam Scott kind of thing. Kevin, nice Kevin. I see he's better than mean Kevin. I like this nice Kevin. You smashed a like. Nice Kevin. You be nice. What if it's actually Patrick Rogers week? This week.
I love that call. What was he? 40% in high stakes last week, I think, or whatever was it last week that he was getting the ownership?
I don't know. What is it with high stakes players and loving Patrick Rogers so much? It's like
a certain set of projections in the industry that really loves Patrick Rogers, and someone who runs them or is at least somewhat related to them that loves Patrick Rogers. That's what leads to Patrick Rogers getting the ownership. I think we're well past the went to the same school as Tiger Woods and is a phenom stage at this point.
I mean, he was a phenom like 16 years ago at this point.
That's what I mean. Like, it's like that has to be expired at this point. It cannot be that any longer. But I believe it was last week where he was 6,900 and then missed the cut. And in high stakes, he was up to like 30 and 40% in some places.
He reminds me a lot of like what's going on with Kurt Kitayama right now. Like if Kitayama is so good to be like number 1 or 2 in projections and modeling every single week, he's not even eligible to play in these fucking events because he's not good enough.
That's the edge, Pat. That's the edge.
I mean, I actually don't mind Rogers because of his price this week. If you want to fill it out, like him, Kevin, you like pick your poison with one of those guys.
Yeah, agreed.
In single entry, are you worried about cumulative ownership or individual? I actually don't give a shit in single entry. I just play the 6 guys I want to play.
Yeah. I mean, you're obviously playing against, what you're up against, right? Like you can see it in those where a lot more people play a safer style lineup where they are taking on a bunch of ownership in their lineup. So as long as you do something like last week's the prime example, if you wanted to go Scottie, you can go Scottie, but then you probably wanted to put 5 lower owned options with him versus going with the field on the rest, just like the exact scene we had up on the screen where it was like, I don't love it, but you could obviously just fade that entire group of 5 guys in your Scottie lineup and still play Scottie and get away with it. You would have landed on something like Dietrich or others in that range possibly. So that's how I treat it.
Underdog tweeted out about, quote, Ludwig illness, practicing on range. Maddie's asking if that means anything. I mean, it seems to mean that he's probably not ill anymore. He's just been sick for 2 weeks.
Good. Yeah. That's how I would take it, for sure.
Yeah. Hey, Pat, what would you set the head-to-head odds, total wins, 2025 Rory versus Scottie? So obviously Rory's already up 1-0, so that gives him a huge advantage in the win market. If Scottie's not going to win 8 times, I don't know, it'd probably be Rory minus 150 right now because he has a win in the bag.
What do you think the line is right now? If there was a line for that,
that's what he's asking us. Like what the line would be. I'd say. It's
I think the books would still have the line at Scottie minus 1.5. Scottie's still going to beat Rory by 2 wins this full season.
Really?
Ahead. Even with Rory's win right now, they should. If they don't, I would be looking at anyone who wants that. I'd certainly be looking for value on that. Rory the entire season this year versus Scottie the entire season. Like he's already been done. Scottie has been fine. It's like that's him shaking off the rust. I would still have Scottie to crush the rest of the season. I don't even have him winning a major, Pat. If you remember going back to one of the hot takes I had from start of the season, but there's so many events.
Yeah, there is. But like Rory's going to play in some of the, like Rory will play the Canadian Open. Like Rory does play a few, and Scottie plays a few off-brand events as well, but so does Rory. That, I don't know, even if none of them win a major, that there's other tournaments out there. Just having the one. If you think that like it's a normal golf year, it's not last year's Scottie, who was had like the second best season ever. He's just like regular Scottie. He wins what, like 3 times, which is huge. Like guys win Player of the Year winning 3 times sometimes.
Yeah. What was Rory's total last year? I don't even remember off the top of my head.
Rory won Zurich, which he does play, so that's always.
Does that even count?
It does. It's a PGA win, and he won Quail Hollow, didn't he?
Something like that. I would say maybe 3. It was like 8-3 last year is my point. So the fact that he has one early and like Scottie didn't die. He cut his hand on a wine glass and then came back and led the field in approach and was just fine last week until he wasn't. So to me, I would still be taking Scottie over Rory. And I would suspect the line, if one existed, would be for it would literally probably be Scottie 1.5 to be favorited still based on those numbers. And no one's expecting him to have the same year as last year. He could win 5 and still cover that versus 3. That's the example.
Yeah, I mean, just even winning 5 is super tough. And Rory probably could have had more wins last year. He's just Rory, and he didn't. He did win Wells Fargo.
Scottie literally gave up like 5 wins last year that we were like, that Scottie should have won that.
Sure.
Scottie should have. So he could have had 13.
Sure, but I think comparing someone to their best season that they're probably ever going to have is tough.
I'm going the other way with it. I'm just saying when you make the comment that Rory could have won more, Scottie literally could have won like 5 more. There was multiple weeks we were like, wow. The Steven Yeager week, prime example. There's tons though like that where he gave it away. I'm saying if Scottie only wins 4 or 5 this year, which is way less than his best season last year, I still think that covers Rory. Everyone's just high on Rory because he got one early. That's the difference.
Yeah, but it's just having the one early based on the odds, just being how hard it is to win. Let's say if Rory gets to 3, I think he covers your spread.
There's like 30. I would bet it. I would bet on that for sure. There's like 30 more events. Not that they're going to play, but for the season. So you have to do their events they play. But my point being, there's plenty of opportunities for Scottie to pick up 3 or 4 wins. And there's no guarantee that just because Rory has one earlier, he picks up a bunch more.
David does ask, do we know why Xander's not here? He's still recovering from his Marilyn Manson surgery. He'll be back soon though with a cool
Leave him with that.
With a cool new trick. All right, that will do it for us. Thank you for joining us live. We're doing this, 9 a.m. every Wednesday morning. It's been a lot of fun stuff here. I've been enjoying doing it live. If you want to participate in the chat, sub to Mayo Media Network. Smash the like on your way out while you're here. Code Mayo at Underdog. The link is in the chat right now. If you want to go do it, you can always check out the live chat replay. If you wanted to join along to see what we're talking about after the fact, obviously this will be out on the audio feed as well. And Tambo, what do you guys got going on over at Ship It Nation this week?
Yeah, tons. I mean, huge NBA night last night. NBA's back, and we're crushing it in that as well. Shout out to our guy Max, won 100K there. We've got all the other sports going on. MMA is back. PGA has just been huge in the showdown streets. Got the mastermind project that I'm working on. And then also, while you're subbing to the Mayo Media Network, let's get to this 50,000 subs. Go to the Ship It Nation YouTube station. Only 200 subs away from getting to 10K. Our goal was Super Bowl, but we just didn't get there quite in time. But I'm still pretty proud of the fact we got to like 97.50 by Super Bowl. So if anybody can help us out there, we appreciate it. And thanks, Pat, as always, for hooking us up and getting it out there. Thank you.
Yes, no problem. As always, sub to the Mayo Media newsletter. That'll have my final bets, the updated weather report, ownership, everything like that coming out on Wednesday evening. It's completely free. I'll additionally have it on Twitter as well underneath the articles tab. So if you do see it up there, just give it a quick like, give it a quick retweet. That really helps the discoverability of all of it. And it takes you like 4 seconds, and that really would help me out at that same time. And I'll have an underdog entry in there as well. I want to see the weather a little bit more, and they don't have all of the lines out as of yet, because they're waiting to see what happens with the weather as well. But I do think I'll play like a Steven Jaeger lower score. That's probably going to be one of the ones. I think I'm going to go big on Jaeger this week, Tambo. So we'll see how that ends up going for me. If you follow along with me and it doesn't work, well, I'm sorry. That's what you get for listening to an idiot. I'll see you next time.